Hello, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger. And we are go for 2 in 22, getting ready for a wonderful, wonderful Christmas weekend, and then getting ready to get ready for the big game after that. So happy to have you with us on what we're calling our Christmas Spectacular. You may say, well, what makes this a Christmas Spectacular? What makes this show different from all other shows? We don't quite know necessarily, but we're going to try to have a lot of fun. And the great news is it is very easy to have fun talking about the Georgia Bulldogs these days. So we're going to react to the recruiting news from yesterday, getting Jordan Hall to kind of, for now anyway, put a finishing touch on the 2023 class with an eye towards February and what might happen with a elite tight end prospect. That's kind of fun to think about. But also the other big news is Georgia added 2 amazing transfer wide receivers yesterday. And I got to tell you, this sets up the Dogs offense, I think, really well for 2023. So we're going to talk about that. We actually didn't hear any from Kirby Smart yesterday from his press conference. We were just so busy doing other things. So I want to give you a little bit of Smart's thoughts on the guys that Georgia signed out of high school. So we'll do some of that. Jeff Sintel stops by. We'll kind of react to all this. A couple of pieces of news around the SEC I want to talk about here for a moment. We'll kind of preview the weekend's bowl action. My bowl picks have been actually not too bad so far, so I feel pretty good about that. And then we'll get you going for a Christmas weekend. So let's get it started right now. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I have told our audience we're trying to make this our Christmas Spectacular, trying to really make this kind of like, I'm not quite old enough for this, but I'm aware of like the Bob Hope Christmas shows and things like that, like Bing Crosby Christmas shows. We're trying to make this kind of like one of those like sort of holiday variety show type things. We don't really have a lot planned to make it actually feel that way, but I like the idea of it. I did bring in a Santa Claus hat today, and of course, for our audience on the podcast, you can't see this, but I have a Georgia Bulldog Santa Claus hat that will absolutely not fit on my head. So if I squeeze this thing on my head like this, does that make it seem like Christmas? I don't know. I don't know how this is working. It just doesn't fit. And this is like an off-the-rack Santa Claus hat, which if you want to get an idea of how big my head is, the fact that the Santa Claus hat doesn't fit at all is probably an example of that. So we will let Eddie wear that instead because it just does not fit on my head at all. I'll also tell you this really quickly, and then we'll kind of get into the content. So, behind the scenes here, a little bit of inside baseball. Our normal producer is Michael Carvel. And Michael, like a lot of people would obviously want to do, is taking a day off here before Christmas to be with his family, and we're certainly hoping he's enjoying all of that, which means that Connor Riley, who many years ago was living in Atlanta, one of our producers around here, but has since moved to Athens and kind of taken on some different duties and responsibilities, but just so happens that Connor was going to be here in the Atlanta area here this weekend, so he volunteered to come in and do the show. So this morning when I woke up, and I wake up early in the morning, and the first thing I heard was that like wind and just like a whipping around and whistling outside, and obviously it was 15 degrees, whatever it was. I was like, gosh, Connor's going to kill me for having to come in and be a part of such a cold weather type show. But listen, that's what we do around here. We endure. You can't call it DawgNation Daily unless you do it every single day, and we absolutely do it every single day around here. And so we're happy to have you with us for it for our Christmas Spectacular. Now, one more piece of business to take care of, then I promise we're going to get into everything else. As we do this show here on a Friday, obviously we're thinking about Christmas, but it's also, I believe, a happy birthday to be given out to one Georgia coach, Kirby Smart. Today, he celebrates a birthday, and who would we be around here if we didn't wish Kirby Smart a happy birthday? He's 47 years old, so Kirby's 47 years old. So I've said this before. I'm a little bit younger than Kirby is, although he probably looks younger than I do, but I'm a little bit younger than Kirby is. There is a chance that for the rest of my career, I'm just sort of talking about Kirby Smart, like for the rest of our professional lives, he's coaching Georgia. I'm doing something like this. It's kind of weird to think, how connected we might be. But really nice from Georgia giving out the happy birthday to Kirby Smart. And have you noticed that Kirby always gives out happy birthday to all his players? So Kirby's always a little bit of a happy birthday guy, and now he gets happy birthday told to him. So here at DawgNation, we also join in to say happy birthday to Kirby Smart, 47 years old today, and we certainly hope he enjoys it in happiness. I'm imagining as a kid, it probably wasn't the most fun thing in the world to have your birthday be on December the 23rd. I'm guessing that's probably the case. But hopefully Kirby gets a cake of his own before all the celebration turns to Christmas here this weekend, and hopefully Kirby Smart does take some time to do all that. We certainly wish that to be the case. Now, let's get into the news of the day. Last night we were on video here for a moment, and we reacted to this then. I want to react with all of you right now. I think it's absolutely huge that Georgia has added 2 names out of the transfer portal at wide receiver. You're talking about Ra Thomas, and you're talking about Dominic Lovett. Thomas from Mississippi State, Lovett from Missouri. In fact, we'll show you on the screen here. Very nice DawgNation edit of Thomas and Lovett, how they're going to look here. You got Thomas already wearing the Georgia jersey, Lovett wearing the Missouri jersey that he had great success in here this year. But nonetheless, 2 very impressive wide receivers. You know, Lovett exceeded 800 yards receiving last year. Thomas exceeded 600 yards receiving last year. Those are big receiving totals for both of these guys. And now they're going to be playing for Georgia, and has been pointed out by a lot of others. When you look at the guys who've been the most successful catching the football in the SEC this year, a good number of those guys are actually returning to play or joining Georgia to play next season. This is a team that all of a sudden starts to bring back a lot of productivity on the offensive side of the ball. And to me, the thing that you like about Lovett and about Thomas more than anything else is the number one question that must be asked of any player that arrives at Georgia. They're already able to provide an emphatic answer of yes to. The most important question being asked of any player when they come to Georgia is, can this player hold up in the SEC? Can this player withstand the rigor necessary to compete in a conference like this? And let's face it, sometimes the answer to that question is just no. There are guys who maybe come here or come to a place like Georgia, and when they get here, you find out of, oh, gosh, they looked okay on film, but that was against Big 12 competition. Or, oh, they looked okay on film, but that was whatever else. When they get here, you realize, gosh, they don't run quite as well as I thought they would. Or whatever issue that might exist with some of that kind of stuff from time to time. That sometimes happen. Of you're saying, I have to look at this guy on film, or I have to rely on my scouting ability and try to decide, how does this translate to the SEC? Well, in the case of Thomas and the case of Lovett, you don't have to wonder about the answer to that question because they've already proven that they can do this. And, you know, they have succeeded. I mean, in the case of Lovett, the big numbers that he put up at Missouri were put up with a very shaky quarterback situation. I mean, a lot of y'all know this. Now, Missouri gave Georgia a good game. We'll all admit that. But across the entirety of the year, and I'm not trying to be funny, I'm not trying to be snarky here, Missouri had some real issues at quarterback. And for a guy like Lovett to still have 800-something yards receiving on a team that had a hard time throwing the ball other than that speaks to something here. And for a guy like Luther Burden, who's at Missouri, and all of us would say, hey, those of us who try to follow this stuff closely would say, man, Burden's a real talent. Well, in almost every area, Lovett's numbers exceeded Burden's this past year to give you an idea how impactful he can be. And you'd say similar things about Ra Thomas there as well. The other thing you have to say here is that, look, the Georgia wide receiver situation just needs more productivity. And if we look at all the Georgia receivers individually, there's a lot I like about all these guys. There really is a lot to like about all these guys. But the group collectively, you'd like to see a little more from it. Now, I'm more than happy to concede this. The number one reason I believe, I was thinking about this before the show began, the number one reason I believe that maybe Georgia from a wide receiver standpoint hasn't fully exceeded or matched the expectations you might have for that group may actually be totally out of its control. And a lot of you are aware of this. Think about the injury situation. You missed A.D. Mitchell this year. How good could A.D. Mitchell have been if he played for an entire year? I think we're left to believe he could have been pretty good. That's just bad luck. And it's not the first time Georgia's dealt with that from the receiver standpoint. Look at what Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint's doing for Georgia right now. This is a good player having a good year. And yet when you want to go back to the 2020 season when he got decimated by injury in that Florida game, all of a sudden I think that kind of impacted the Rosemy-Jacksaint timeline, and it has maybe made it more difficult for him to be a great player, which I think he had a chance to do. I mean, I think that Rosemy-Jacksaint coming out of high school was a phenomenal talent. He's shown flashes of that talent thus far at Georgia, but once again, this is a bad luck situation where a guy like this has kind of dealt with injury. And you'd say the same thing about Dominic Blaylock. For him, it's been 2 injuries. And obviously you get back to 2021 of what would it have been like to have George Pickens for a full season, especially when you see what he's doing in the NFL, playing for, the Pittsburgh Steelers and making all those plays, as the folks say on social media. He is him. That's what he looks like when he's in the NFL. And obviously a full season of him in 2021 would have been a huge deal there as well. So maybe the number one reason that Georgia hasn't fully achieved everything it could achieve at the wide receiver position has been, for the most part, out of its control because of injury. But nonetheless, whatever the reasons are, the results just haven't quite been enough. So Georgia needs wide receiver help. a guy like Lovett and a guy like Thomas clearly are able to provide that. And, once again, when it comes to already checking boxes and kind of coming in as a little bit of a sure thing, I think we have some reason to believe that they provide that in a way, with all due respect, the average high school recruit might not be able to do. In fact, if you want to go back to earlier this week when Smart was talking about the wide receivers that Georgia signed for this particular class, and there are a lot of guys like Tyler Williams and Yazeed Haynes. There are a lot of guys that you really like there, but there is one phrase that Smart used in particular about these guys that I don't think you have to say this about guys like Lovett and Thomas right now. This is Kirby talking about the receivers that Georgia added as a part of the 2023 class, and I also think this gives us some context for what Georgia also has now added with the transfer portal as well. Here's Kirby.
Excited about those guys. Speed, athleticism. Been here practicing with us. Each one's different. They all probably need, they're going to have to hit the weight room and get stronger to be able to really do the things we want them to do, but you want to take a guy that has natural speed, pass catching ability, make you miss ability, run after the catch, vertical threats, and we think we get that in those three guys.
So, yeah, listen, you talk about the speed they bring to the table, but you also kind of think about, as he said, listen, you may have to get in the weight room, kind of get a little bit bigger. That's one of those things that you don't have to maybe necessarily worry about for a guy like Love or a guy like Thomas because they've been in the SEC. Now, listen, I think there's a different standard of physical condition required at a place like Georgia that's succeeding compared to places like Missouri and maybe Mississippi State where they haven't been succeeding at quite the same level. But nonetheless, there's already a level of expectation that has been set because these guys have played. And then just sort of sum up this portion of the conversation. Y'all, this is just really bad news for the rest of college football. It just really is. It just really is. Because I really believe that the pathway towards victory is in the margins, right? It's by creating margin. In other words, when you are so much better than the team that you're playing, you just create a greater likelihood of being able to win. And we know what Georgia's able to do defensively. We know what they've done offensively has been really productive and prolific there as well. And all of a sudden now you're just making it that much better. And what you're really doing is saying, hey, we thought that this is someone outside the bubble of Dog Nation. We thought that the arrival of the transfer portal and the greater proliferation of NIL and things like that, we thought that might be a way for a program like Georgia to be taken down a peg. But instead, it's Georgia leveraging some of this stuff, in this case the transfer portal, for its own benefit. Georgia using the portal to get better, not Georgia having the portal used against it to make it worse. No, this is Georgia using the portal to get better. And y'all know this. Georgia will never be a program that's solely built out of the transfer portal or even mostly built out of the transfer portal. But it's also not going to be one of these programs that says we're never going to use this at all. Georgia's going to be open to these kinds of things. When you have a chance to get better, when you have a chance to add a little spice, a little seasoning to what you already have on your roster, you're going to go out there and do that. That's what Lovett, and that's what, to me, Thomas are all about here. It's about Georgia getting even better on paper for next season than it would appear to be right now. And for a Georgia team that's on its way to potentially go for 2-22 and win a national championship this year, the idea that this team could be a preseason number one in 2023, I think you have to take that as a very real possibility. Now, let me say this really quickly. We talked also on video yesterday, about the other 2023 signing news, and that involves Jordan Hall. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but I do want to give a big shout out for what a big win for Georgia I think this is. Once again, we'll show you the very nice Dog Nation edit that celebrated the Hall news here. And when you think about a guy who's, you're talking about, ranked right there in the, I think the 24/7 composite has him like the number 73 player in the country or something like that. Already 6'3", already 310 pounds. This is a defensive lineman that you compare with a guy like Jamal Jarrett, and you really can start kind of building a proof of concept for the future that reminds you a little bit what the 2021 defense had before, where Jarrett's kind of in the Jordan Davis role, and a guy like Hall's and maybe you'd say the Devontae Wyatt role or something along those lines. Yesterday on video, I thought our buddy Connor Riley had a very interesting comparison to kind of how the Hall conclusion to his senior season maybe feels a little bit like what Jalen Carter's high school career conclusion sort of felt like, and that's obviously a lot to put on a guy like Jordan Hall. But the point is I want you to know this is also a really big win here for Georgia. In other words, if you've been following the Lovett stuff, you've been following the Ra Thomas stuff, the Jordan Hall stuff, you've been following all of that. I just think that you're reminded of what a special time this is to be a Georgia fan, that the present's very good. Georgia's on the way to winning a national championship. At least we hope that's the case. But the future is really bright as well. utilizing the transfer portal a little bit, utilizing the recruiting process a lot, and all of a sudden the rosters that you imagine in 2023 and 2024 and beyond, boy, what a great time it is to be a Dog fan. So Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you, and welcome into DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger. We are glad to have you with us as we go for 2 in 22, and happy to have all of you and our friends at Kroger with us as we do all of that. And, of course, Kroger, a great name to know for all your holiday shopping there as well. Right now, as you're kind of getting ready, last-minute stuff maybe, those gifts that you're buying, or decorations, or that food that goes on the table, a lot of fun holiday meals with family and friends taking place this time of year. Don't forget, you can get big savings on this at Kroger right now. I'm talking about 30% off. Christmas lights, wrap, decor, so much more. So stop by and see your local Kroger on that. You can also go to Kroger.com/holiday. That's a website, Kroger.com/holiday, to find out more about that. And, of course, to all of you joining us on video, on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Twitch, on radio. We'll be back on, I guess, Tuesday again on the radio. They're taking a little time off for the holiday there. We'll be back on Tuesday on the radio on 960 The Ref. And, of course, podcasts all over the place, Apple, Spotify, everything else. We just really appreciate you being a part of the program here today. Now, speaking of Georgia recruiting, coming up in a couple of moments, we're going to talk to Jeff Sentell about his thoughts on this 2023 class. And I think we'll have to add the Thomas Lovett stuff into that, because these are obviously additions taking place during this early signing period. They almost function like recruits for Georgia because you had to recruit them onto your roster. So we'll do some of that with Jeff here coming up in just a moment there as well. But before that, I do want to go around the doghouse. And so many of you enjoying your home this time of year, cozy and warm for the Christmas. Maybe you got a fire in the fireplace and the Christmas lights are all turned on. Well, the folks at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services understand how important home is to you, and they deliver around the doghouse to us here today. So we're happy to have them with us. Thank you so much for that. And one of the things that we have not probably done enough as of yet is to hear from Kirby Smart on his thoughts on what Georgia does in the signing class, what it added this week in kind of the traditional, what we think of as National Signing Day. So I want to do some of that right now, some on defense, some on offense. But first, Kirby Smart's kind of asked to kind of give his definition of what he thought success on signing day meant. I think this is interesting to hear this from Kirby. So before we kind of get into some of the position-specific analysis from Kirby, how about the overarching thing of how he defines success on a day like National Signing Day? Here is Kirby.
A successful signing day is defined 4 years from now. You know, I look backwards on that. I leave it to you guys to rate them, because I can't compare somebody else's to ours, because I don't really look at somebody else's. I only compare ours to what they do when they leave, not what they do when they arrive, how many of them graduate, how many wins they have, what kind of people they become, how they integrate into our culture is probably the best defining success quality. And hopefully they'll do that well. We'll onboard them well. And, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, there's probably not a lot of difference in all these kids being signed. The difference is what you do with them. But people make it about who you sign, not what they become, and I'm a lot more interested in what they become.
I think that Smart basically says three very interesting things there at the end, and a lot of coaches wouldn't do this. You know, Kirby kind of puts pressure on the coaching staff to develop the players. It's not one of those things of, hey, you know, my success depends on how good of a player I can get. You know, Kirby says in this particular case, you know, we're going to take these players, and from year to year, the talent kind of looks the same. The job we have as coaches is to develop those guys. That's kind of a personal responsibility type statement from Kirby, which I think is kind of interesting. And the other thing is, you know, Smart talks about he's more worried about the people they become and how they fit into the culture at Georgia. And I know that kind of feels sort of blowhardy a little bit, but if anybody has a right to say that, I'm not saying Kirby's a blowhard. I'm saying that in the coming from a different coach, that might sound, oh gosh, here we go, you know, kind of, you know, basically saying something that isn't true. But in the case of Kirby, I think that we have a lot of evidence that kind of stuff really does matter to him. We've seen him stand by players and try to provide help for players that maybe weren't capable of helping Georgia on the field, and yet, you know, Kirby and the coaching staff showed a willingness to want to try to help the player, even when that player kind of wasn't in a position to do much for them on the field at that particular moment. This is something that Kirby's kind of proven to be that's important to him. And as far as the whole culture thing goes, y'all, if you want to go back and try to talk about one of the huge building blocks, one of the huge foundational pillars for how Georgia won a national championship in 2021, it was the closeness this team felt with each other. We've had players say that. And to kind of come back and try to do all that in 2022, and for some of the players who've been here now for a couple of years, they've had a couple of years worth of kind of really being a part of building a really special culture. We see evidence of that all the time. And so when Kirby says, hey, fitting into our culture, being connected, the way that Smart uses that word a lot, I don't think that's just kind of like lip service when a guy like Kirby Smart says that. I believe that the people who are a part of the Georgia program, on the inside of the Georgia program, I really do believe that they have a strong sense that's been a huge part of their success formula. In fact, when you look at one of the position groups in which Georgia was the most successful on signing day, the inside linebacker spot, this is guys like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson and Troy Bowles. When you look at that, in addition to the prodigious athleticism and the already well-refined skill sets these guys have, once again, some of that same kind of culture stuff is sort of at play for what Kirby likes about these guys as well. This is what Kirby said about that group going back to Wednesday, too.
Well, a really talented group in terms of speed, athleticism in the day and age that we're in right now, where the guys are fast, athletic, got to play in space, got to be able to strike and play with toughness, but also high character. Those three guys bonded, got to be good friends, have connected. I think Schumann and the defensive staff done a tremendous job kind of selling the brand. Look what these three guys all came out and did. Look what these two guys are currently doing. Look what the guys we signed last year that are here and playing roles on special teams. You'll develop here, you'll become better, and you'll have fun doing it. And that group is tight. I think it kind of recruits itself when you talk about the Kobe, Quay, and Channing, what they've done. These guys, they want to emulate guys like that. And they're really high character kids, and really impressed with everything about those three guys.
I mean, maybe I'm making too much of this. There's a possibility that I am. But when I think back to last year's NFL scouting combine, and you had guys like Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, who were all kind of standing around waiting to watch the other guys do their drill work. And they're kind of cheering for each other when they're running their times and their sprint drills and things like that. They were there to support each other, and you were left to conclude, well, gosh, these guys really enjoyed playing with each other along the way to a national championship. That mattered to this Georgia team in 2021. I think we would all say there's evidence that was the case. And so when Kirby Smart says, hey, these guys, Wilson and Bowles and Allen, they're already all friends with each other. Well, that obviously kind of feels like what made Georgia special in 2021. These guys kind of already have that connection. And here's the thing I'm going to tell you. It's not necessarily normal in life for guys who are kind of a similar station to feel bonded and connected with each other. In fact, I think it's more normal in more walks of life for there to be some jealousy. If you're Raylan Wilson, you might have a tendency to want to think, I'm the big linebacker. And yet here's C.J. Allen thinking he's the big linebacker, and here's Troy Bowles thinking he's the big linebacker, that this is the prototype of the future at the linebacker spot. But instead, we don't get the sense at Georgia there is any kind of tolerance to that kind of, potential jealousy or comparison or anything like that, that they enjoy playing with each other, and they root for each other's success as much as they root for their own success. We've seen examples of that taking place at Georgia on the field, and it sounds like, according to Kirby, these next group of inside linebackers may have the same kind of thing going on, which is really, really fun. And then what's cool about this 2023 class for Georgia there too is I'd actually kind of thought for a while that maybe the inside linebacker group, that trio that we just mentioned, maybe this is the headline. Maybe this is as good as it gets, that Georgia signed what is essentially a laughable level of talent, ridiculous, the degree of talent that Bowles and Wilson and Allen already have, that's going to be kind of the thing that you remember this 2023 class for. And then lo and behold, before it's all said and done, you got a Damon Wilson, an outside linebacker, to go along with the Sam Mpemba and a Gabe Harris, and all of a sudden your edge rusher group looks really just as good on paper as your inside linebacker group looks. And Kirby Smart talked about the outside linebackers as well. Now, to be fair, Smart was talking about this before Damon Wilson officially became official, but the odds are Kirby was thinking about him already as he was saying what he said about what Georgia also adds at the inside linebacker spot as well. Here's Kirby again.
Yeah, excited about the group we got there. I think we've got good depth. We're trying to get that room back to where it's been in the past. There was a time when there were 3 or 4 really high draft picks in that room. That's what you want in that skill set. That helps you on third down. Those body types help you on special teams. The 6'2" plus, the 240 plus is a position that can cover kicks, can cover return punts in terms of holding people up. So much value in that room. Packages you can do on defense. So when we've been at our best, we've had a lot of speed and athleticism in that room, and we're trying to get back to it. And We hope these guys can do that and provide some defensive end help as well when it comes to playing 4-3 and having two guys out there.
Once again, some parts of that can sort of sound like a very Kirby-ish thing to say, pivoting to talk about special teams and talk about sort of five-star outside linebackers. I do get that. But let me ask you this. Were you glad to have a long-bodied outside linebacker on special teams in the Rose Bowl in 2017 when Lorenzo Carter was blocking a field goal in overtime against, or late in the game, I can't remember if it was overtime or not, against Oklahoma? I would say that you probably were. That's one of those things that was a very, very big deal for Georgia in winning one of the most thrilling games in program history. So, yeah, you better believe long-bodied outside linebackers have worked out pretty well for you when it comes to stuff like that. Then quickly here, a couple of things on the offensive side of the ball. Kirby was also asked specifically about Roderick Robinson, the running back signing there as well, who had a tremendous conclusion to his high school career in California. He was named Max Preps Player of the Year in that state, very big, populous state. So this is a pretty cool award to bring home. And Kirby also talked about what he likes from Roderick Robinson, who stands as the running back signing in this class. Here's Kirby again.
Size, speed, toughness, really soft hands. He's your SEC type back that can get hard yards, but is athletic enough to do some things in space. Really, to be honest, I like the guy's character. I like the background he has. He has family from South Carolina. He has family from Georgia. He has family from Birmingham. He's attached to the state. He has really good quality toughness. He's hard to tackle. Football is still a game where you have to get people on the ground, and he's hard. He's hard to get on the ground, and he loves the game, and he's very intelligent. So he excited us on tape, but he even won us over more in person.
If you were listening to the show yesterday, I said one of the things I like the most about Damon Wilson is the fact that Wilson put up numbers, that this is not a project player. This is a guy that's actually productive at kind of a high-level high school program, and those numbers kind of mean something to me when you think about translating to the college game, and I would say the same thing's kind of true for Roderick Robinson. This is a guy that was very productive at the end of his high school career, which I think does give you a little bit greater certainty about his ability to contribute in college there, too. I think that Smart's right when he says that. One more on the subject of the offensive line. And the two big adds to the offensive line for Georgia, Bo Hughley, who Georgia holds on to, and Monroe Freeling, who Georgia won a pretty high-profile recruiting battle a couple of months ago to bring in. And yet we are also kind of, I would say, about to be in a little bit of a period of transition for the Georgia offensive line where some of the big elite recruits that Georgia's brought in recent years are about to maybe start cycling out of the program, and some other guys are going to get their chance to step up. And Georgia's obviously in a period of transition coming to the end of the first year of Stacey Searles on the job here. And Kirby was kind of asked to provide an evaluation of kind of where things stand with offensive line recruiting, given the fact they've had a lot of success there in the past. They've had kind of a big brand when it comes to the offensive line. And yet the future of this group is at least a little bit uncertain right now. This is what Kirby said about his offensive line recruiting and the job that Stacey Searles has done on that, once again going back to Wednesday.
I think when you look at us over the past 3 to 4 years, I think we've had the second or third most O-linemen drafted, especially top-round picks like we've been able to have with tackles going early and Ben Cleveland, a lot of the guys. So the program sells itself in terms of development. You get to go against some of the best defensive linemen, 3 first-round defensive linemen. You get to go against those guys. So we recruit as a staff, not as a position. And I think Stacey's done a tremendous job this year. I think we got some really talented, flexible guys that can go inside and out. That's always what you're looking for, is to get length at tackle, but guys that can go in and play guard. And I think we were able to do that in this class, and really excited about the O-line class we got coming in.
So interesting evaluations there from Kirby Smart. You can go to the DawgNation YouTube page and hear the entirety of everything that Smart said on National Signing Day. And, of course, we'll hear a lot from Georgia coach Kirby Smart and other assistants and the players themselves as you head towards next week when we go for 2-22 and get ready for the Peach Bowl against Ohio State. But for now, that is Around the Doghouse, presented by Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And as I said before, it's Christmas time, you're enjoying your new home, or maybe you're enjoying your old home or your home, however long it's been yours. And Berkshire Hathaway Home Services is all about that. But they also understand this, that maybe the house you're living in maybe doesn't quite feel like home as much as you want it to. Maybe you're thinking about the job that you'd like to take, or maybe you have taken. It's a little bit farther away than you currently are living, or you want to get back closer to family or someone that you love. And that's a really great reason to make a move. And the folks at Berkshire Hathaway Home Service understand that the best time for new beginnings is right now. That means when you think about in the new year where you'd like to be, where you'd like to live, and the real estate decisions that are necessary to make that dream possible, Well, that's where Berkshire Hathaway Home Services can step in and provide you the help you need to get there. They understand how to be on both ends of this transaction, what it means to sell a house, what it means to buy a new home, and what it means to have a comfortable, enjoyable process every step of the way. That's what the agents who work for BHHS have been doing for a long time. They can do that for you there too. Plus, maybe your dream is about something different. Maybe it's a commercial-related dream where you've got a business and it's been kind of thriving, kind of a home-based situation, but now it's time to get that commercial real estate, that storefront that can actually open you up for a lot more business opportunities. Well, that's where Berkshire Hathaway Home Service can be a help as well. Or it's time to be an investor. Great way to invest, especially with uncertain times in other places. Real estate, always, I would say, a great investment opportunity. So our friends at Berkshire Hathaway Home Service can help you with that there too. So find them online, bhhsgeorgia.com. That's bhhsgeorgia.com. Great to have Berkshire Hathaway Home Services presenting Around the Doghouse to us here today. So this is our Christmas Spectacular DawgNation Daily episode here today, and it can't be a spectacular if we don't have a spectacular guest. So with that in mind, in the aftermath of everything that goes down with signing day, recruiting portal, and everything else in between, what do you say we have a fun conversation right now on the road, assisted by AAA, with Jeff Sintel? Let's talk to him right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So, Jeff, there's obviously lots of headline tough stuff to talk about, and in some form or fashion, we've kind of talked about some of that here as of late. So let me kind of do something before we get there, and admittedly, this is very much in the weeds here, but this is one of those days we kind of have time to do this. Kirby just said, when you evaluate offensive line recruitment, that it's not one of those things where you evaluate Stacey Searles in particular. He says we recruit as a staff, not as a position. And I'm not talking necessarily about here just a referendum on Stacey Searles. I'm more curious about the program overall. How true do you think that is? In other words, how important is the area recruiter, someone who's kind of responsible for a geographic location, for instance, like Del McGee with Mikael Williams? That's a running backs coach who was recruiting a player from kind of McGee stomping grounds down there in Columbus. When you evaluate the recruiting process and the recruiting machine for a place like Georgia, for or other programs, how much is it about area recruiters and support staff, quality control analysts, and kind of where does that stop and where does it start for the position coach in terms of winning some of these key recruiting battles that we talk about on a weekly basis around here?
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Happy holidays, Brandon. Since we're on a DawgNation spectacular program, I'm going to try and come up with a spectacular answer there. And for me, this feels like it takes a village. I know that's a popular term, but let's just take it one by one. So many recruits I talk to, they tell me about the entire support staff at Georgia. That's the recruiting department. That's the popular Coach Coop on social media. It's the ladies in the office, Logan Reed, Angela Kirkpatrick, Christian Harris. There's a lot, Chandler LaCroix. There's a lot of base level folks around Georgia that just do their jobs a lot better than everybody else. And then you've got an asset like Del McGee, for instance. You mentioned offensive line. I'm nodding my head and thinking, Del's in Columbus. Del's like the closer in Columbus. Everyone knows him because of his ties to that area. Knows every high school coach, knows most of the players in Columbus when they're like in the 7th and 8th grade coming up. So when you have that, and then you add in a Stacey Searles, I think Georgia is just really maximizing all of its resources. I think what's intriguing about Georgia's returned first year offensive line coach, or their OL coach in his second stint at Georgia, they've got benefits from, Searles knew those gentlemen that he signed, two in particular, Bo Hughley and Monroe Freeling, the two highest-rated offensive linemen in his class. He got to know them from when he was at North Carolina, and they liked Stacey a lot. They liked the relationship a lot. Oh, yeah, and then all of a sudden he got the job at Georgia, and that kind of supersized Stacey Searles' chances at getting a prospect like Monroe Freeling and a prospect like Bo Hughley. Like before, they didn't know if they could get him. He didn't know if they could get him at North Carolina. But the answer when he was at Georgia was most assuredly so, that they could pull in players like that. I think recruiting is so much a relationship business. Brandon, I've heard stories where schools have lost coaches for a missed visit, schools have lost recruits for missed visit or saying the wrong thing or not being convenient to these prospects when they're visiting, and that plays a large part because they've got so many things they evaluate a staff on and a team on in terms of a feel, a vibe, connections, and things like that. So what Georgia does is they have a lot of aces up their sleeve, and I think they use them all very well.
If I give you one person who is likely to be a legitimate superstar out of this 2023 class, who's the name you'd most likely give me?
Legitimate superstar by Georgia standards or college football standards?
Well, I mean,
because I look at that differently.
Well, I mean, a legitimate superstar is legitimate. I mean, Trayvon Walker's the number one overall pick. You know, Jordan Davis was the Nagurski Award winner. I mean, like, a legitimate superstar is measured by, you know, NFL draft status, national award status. This isn't like there's only a small number of like legitimate superstars. So if you're talking about, you know, somebody from this group who could be there on either side of the ball, by the way, a legitimate superstar, who do you think it would be?
Yeah, see, that's why this class is so robust, Brandon. That's what makes that question a little bit harder for me, because I see several future first-round types. I see several future All-SEC, All-American types in this class. But if you had to peg me on a guy that I think is the guy that has the most ability to be the one or two shining stars out of this class, I'm going to go a little off the beaten path. I think there's something really special about C.J. Allen. I think he's a true three-down linebacker. I think he's a guy that, well, here's a great example. So not only did he do a lot of those Roquan Smith type things in terms of, I think he carried the ball for over 1,500 yards and 25 touchdowns. He's a three-sport athlete. He ran track. He played baseball. He ran an 11-1. In the 100-meter dash, and he's carrying about 220 pounds very easily. But all those are great things. Those are a lot of things that a lot of Georgia fans can say, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But the thing for me is I truly believe that if you ask C.J. Allen when he was 8 or 9 years old what was his dream and what was his family's dream, they would have said playing for Georgia. And in this era where Georgia gets the best player in this state, the best player in that state, the 5 stars here, I think there's something still special about a Georgia boy who, when things get tough, and they will undoubtedly get tough, I think they've probably already been tough for C.J. Allen in town this week for bowl practices. I think that matters for him to go look in his locker and go look at that power G and remember to himself, he's like, man, when I was 9, I wanted this. When I was 12, I wanted this, and I wanted to do it right here. I think that's that extra special something that turns a lot of All-Americans, is what Georgia has into this class, into really special players. And I think Jamal Jarrett is probably one of the most important players in this class. He may not be the most talented, but he's going to allow a C.J. Allen, he's going to allow a Raylan Wilson, he's going to allow a Troy Bowles to be Butkus Award nominees, because he is going to soak up blocks as well as anybody has at Georgia. Now, he won't be as fast or have the lateral movement as Jordan Davis, because he's not a superhuman. No one is like Jordan Davis. But I think that guy is really going to help empower the players around him to be very, very good. And I also think the guy that they got yesterday next to him, Jordan Big Baby Hall, funny story, Jordan would always tell me he's hanging out in Athens. He's feeling really cool. He likes the vibe. And when he goes walking downtown, he was usually around Jamal Jarrett. He's like, man, I'm 6'4", I'm about 310 pounds. I think I'm a big guy, but then I'm walking with Jamal, who's like 6'5", 6'6", 340. I think at some points this year, Jamal was probably 360. He said he felt like that was his bodyguard. And I think I've seen a lot of the memes on social media where you have you've already seen like the parallels between Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt, between Jamal Jarrett and also Big Baby Hall. There's so many names, Brandon. I think the guy you're going to like the most, because he's going to check that box off your wish list for so many years, is I think Tyler Williams is going to be what everyone has dancing in their heads. The sugar plums about a first-round receiver who catches 50 balls for 1,200 yards. I think he's that kind of player. I think he's the first player Georgia has brought in since George Pickens that you can say, you know what, that's what a first-round pick plays like, and that's what a first-round pick looks like. And I think Georgia quarterbacks to come are going to be very happy seeing Tyler Williams running downfield out wide.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to say one more thing about Jamal Jarrett, too. I think that, it's so easy to make the Jordan Davis comparison, and obviously to be as good a player as Jordan Davis proved to be for Georgia is really, really hard. But the one thing, and we talked about, you and I have been doing this show for a long time. We were talking about Jordan Davis as a recruit, and the one thing that we were saying, I know you were kind of pushing this out there, is that there's an inability sometimes by certain, even smart recruiting analysts. There's an inability sometimes to measure the true nose guard defensive tackle type because you don't have the stats to look at. It's sort of hard to quantify what they're doing, and in terms of really judging the value of a prospect when it comes to that interior defensive lineman like Jordan Davis once was, whether Jamal Jarrett is right now, that there is always going to be a tendency to underrate those guys during the recruiting process because an edge rusher, you can look at the sacks, other positions, you can kind of see, the stats. There's not necessarily that statistical validation of an interior defensive lineman like what Davis was, like what Jarrett is now. And so I do think if you're saying who's the most underrated signing that Georgia has, on that reason alone, it might be Jarrett because the true nose man defensive tackle has historically sometimes been underrated by certain folks within the recruiting world.
It always is, Brandon. Do we remember, I believe it's the 2018 season when Georgia really took off. That was when they inserted Jordan Davis into the lineup. Their run defense got a lot stouter. They started playing their best football in 2018 as a defensive unit because the guy's going to soak up blocks. He's going to change the way the protections work. He's going to change the blocking schemes from an opponent. And this just mass, man. There's not a lot of human beings quite like the Jordan Davises of the world and Jamal Jarrett's of the world. And after a while, just the physics, man, of dealing with that load for 40, 50 snaps or 30, 40 snaps for a big guy like that, it just wears on an offense. It fatigues an offense. And I think, there's so many guys like this that, everybody's going to talk about the 5 stars. Brandon, I can talk for a minute about Damon Wilson. I can talk for a minute about Raylan Wilson. I can talk for a minute about Samuel Mpemba, and it'd all be glowing bouquet stuff where there's a lot of promise for these guys. Like, I do feel that there's a lot of these guys that are going to hit. Their ceilings are going to be very high. Their floors are going to be very high as well. So there's a lot of guys like this, but the one guy that I know went under everybody's radar because he was a decommitment and a recommitment is I really like the addition of Daniel Harris. Now, Daniel Harris is a guy that, he's 6'2", 6'3". He has that ideal length, Brandon, but he also has a 10.74 in the 100 meters. Now, he's got to get him some biscuits and gravy. He's got to eat some PB&Js to get maybe 10, 15 more pounds on him to be a legitimate SEC corner. But I think when he does, he's going to have everything you want to see in a Georgia corner. A little bit more fluidity, a little bit more, just looks more like a natural cornerback than even some guys of that size in the past, like Keely Ringo. I really think Harris, giving him about a year worth of seasoning, I think he's going to be a starter for 2 years at cornerback at Georgia. And at Georgia, that's saying quite a lot.
Let me say one more thing about Jarrett. I don't mean to make the whole show about this, and I don't do this very much, but I looked him up on ESPN. So ESPN has Jamal Jarrett rated as the 16th best player in North Carolina, the 219th best player in the region. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 3 player in the state of North Carolina and the number 94 player in the country overall. So that's just a little bit of an example there. We would say, 24/7 does this for a living. ESPN kind of doesn't. And, that's kind of an example of just kind of the way some of this kind of stuff is just sort of misunderstood. There's no way there are 15 players in the state of North Carolina that Georgia would rather have more so than Jamal Jarrett. There's just not.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Jamal, most people, it's kind of like Jordan Davis, man. About a year, I can remember these stories when I found Jamal Jarrett and I saw what he could be. Well, Jamal Jarrett, Brandon, in February, I think that's when we came back. In February, it was really cold. It was at Denmark High School in Alpharetta, not too far from the DawgNation Daily World headquarters or the suburban headquarters. And he literally told me, he's like, man, I have to go to these camps to prove to people that I'm actually a defensive tackle because some people think I'm an offensive tackle. We heard that with Jordan Davis as well, but he was literally rated at both positions for a while, and he had to put down the film and put together the camp reps to prove to people that he would be rated or classified as a D tackle, Brandon. And that's how, some guys kind of get lost in the webs, man. And when it's kind of hard to do when you see a massive human being like Jamal Jarrett. He's loved Georgia. Those linebackers, they told me when they saw Jamal Jarrett and they knew that guy's going to be in the class, and they're like, oh my gosh, it wasn't so much if I'm going to get to play, I'm going to have to play with two other guys just like me who are just as great. I think the more impressionable vision of Georgia was like, that guy's going to be taking on blockers and going to let me come downhill. That's the way Georgia's built. And, I think they get players everywhere. I'm going to shout this from the rooftops, man. 22 and 2023 recruiting classes, the combination of those two guys defensively will make Georgia as stout as ever. You look at a guy like, I think I've tried to mention 8 names in our conversation so far this morning. You better not forget about A.J. Harris at cornerback as well, because that guy, if you want to pull like a hot take out of me about this class and what could happen really crazy with this class, I think A.J. Harris can probably start as quickly as any of those defensive backs, number one, because he's built that way. He has great technique. He works at his game for years and years and years. J.C. Horn called the shot, Brandon. Before his junior season, former first-round pick J.C. Horn said, A.J. Harris, who worked out with him, said he's good enough to play in the SEC right now. Fran Brown loves him. He's physical. He's got a body ready for the SEC. I think A.J. Harris is going to be in the 2 deep at Georgia at corner quicker than most people might have ever imagined.
So there you go. It is On the Road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel. I want to ask you about transfer wide receivers here coming up in a moment. Before that, though, let me remind folks that all of this made possible by our friends at AAA. We're on the road a lot this holiday season. Of course, for you, hopefully you're like me. You take that AAA membership card with you everywhere that you go. But I don't want you to just think about AAA when it comes to roadside assistance, although they're great for that. They're really legendary at that. I want you to think about them as a great resource for your insurance needs as well, including your auto insurance there too, because AAA's actually been doing auto insurance for a long time, and they've been in the game for a while, and they've been taking really good care of folks. In fact, they have a 93% satisfaction rate. So if that many people are stepping up to say, yeah, we love our experience with AAA, then trust me when I tell you, you will love it too. So give them a call, 833-718-2075. 833-718-2075 to find a branch near you and make a decision to switch and save with AAA for your auto insurance today. All right, Jeff, so we'll kind of finish up with this. Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas. I think these are huge ads for Georgia. Admittedly, I would like to have had Travis Hunter, and yet for as dazzled as I am by Travis Hunter's athleticism and kind of what he did in Georgia high school football, the truth is there is still a question about a guy like Travis of, well, how would that translate to the SEC? And while the overall ceilings for Lovett and Thomas may not be quite as high, the truth is they do more easily answer the question of, well, what do these guys look like while playing against SEC competition, because they've done it before. And frankly, with all due respect to anybody that Georgia has a chance to add out of high school, there's also an element of me that's going to be a little bit more excited as a Georgia fan, once again, for these proven college commodities, which what these guys have turned out to be. A leading receiver from Mississippi State, a leading receiver to Missouri, to add that to what Georgia already has with the likes of a Brock Bowers and an A.D. Mitchell and things like that. To me, this is a huge boost for the 2023 Georgia offense. What was your thoughts on Georgia kind of utilizing the transfer portal here to upgrade the wide receiver situation?
Yeah. Everybody's like, Kirby mentioned this. Everybody kind of played that card that Georgia was the one school that didn't dip into the transfer portal over the last year. Well, that was because, we got to take Kirby Smart when it comes to recruiting at face value. He didn't see things that Georgia needed. He didn't see players that Georgia needed that were going to boost the program and help the program. So when he's bringing in Lovett, that's one of those guys that's going to look a lot like an Isaiah McKenzie, a Ladd McConkey, McCole Hardman, a really shifty playmaker that you're just going to get the ball out in space and watch him do what he does. You got Ra Thomas, I think, is more of a prototype first-round receiver. He's a COVID casualty, Brandon. I think, one of the things I think we shared on your program, or we shared something about Ra a while back, was that, he was originally not really seen really well coming out of COVID. And, the people really close to Ra tell me that if he would have had camps, if he would have gotten a chance to go all those camps, probably he winds up at an Alabama or an Auburn or a really big school in the SEC. He was going to go to South Carolina. South Carolina thought they had a steal when Will Muschamp lost his job there. Mike Bobo was the offensive coordinator, and that opened up the door for, Mississippi State to come in and get Ra Thomas. But, Ra-Ra's a guy that, how many people can you say have 12 touchdowns in the SEC already and has 4.4 speed, great hands? One of the things that he didn't like about Mississippi State, besides the rotations, was he didn't really like that he was just seen as a fade ball or a deep ball guy or a, back shoulder type guy. He wanted to show people he could run the whole route tree, and he's going to get the chance to do that now at Georgia. I think those are plug-and-play players. And, Brandon, I tell people, watch this all the time. We shared this on Hedges on Wednesday night. If you see Georgia getting guys in portal, and if you see guys, Georgia now, in this day and age, going out of a lot of players, going for a lot of players at a certain position, that should be an indicator. That should be some eye candy that tells you, you know what, something's happening with the current room, the current chairs in the room at that position, which says, you know what, Georgia's going to have some traction there. Georgia's going to have some turnover there, and that's why they're getting more players that can do this type of role and can play that type of position out of the portal or inside a certain recruiting class.
Jeff, very quickly, short question, short answer. Is Smoke Bowie still in play for UGA? Is that the next domino that could fall for the Dogs here in the portal?
Yeah, I think he's still in play. I think he's certainly a guy that's sitting there making it clear that, he loves Georgia on some of his social media over the last couple of days. Georgia has a position there. They need safeties. They need more defensive backs. They're very familiar with Smoke Bowie, and I think, he's certainly still a potential commodity for Georgia in this class as well.
Great stuff, Jeff. Merry Christmas to you. Thanks so much for being a part of this here today. We'll look forward to catching up with you. And, of course, next couple of weeks, we'll have All-Star games coming up, a lot of chances to hear from some of these big-time signees. So we're very excited about that opportunity in the weeks to come. And, of course, we'll enjoy the chance to chat with you about that right here on DawgNation Daily as well.
Hey, Brandon, Merry Christmas to everybody out there, your family, the DawgNation family, everybody out there. It's a blessing to do what we do, and it is truly a blessing to be able to celebrate another Christmas season. I hope everyone has a very special one over the weekend.
Good stuff, Jeff. Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, great stuff there from Jeff Sintel. Always fun to be on the road, assisted by AAA with him here on our program, and we want to give you an update on some of the other things happening around the SEC there as well. If you don't mind, can we bring that music down just a little bit? The SEC Through music has a tendency to be a little bit loud, so we'll bring that down to remind you we're cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I got to tell you, I do not like cold weather. I can't stand it, and when I'm walking around today, it's like 15 degrees, and the area out in front of our building, for whatever reason, is just super cold. There's like a wind tunnel there and all kinds of crazy stuff, and as I'm walking in, I'm like, boy, it'd be nice to be on Perfect Day Coco Cay right now. It'd be nice to be on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship like the one we're all going to be together on Independence of the Seas coming up this April, or Icon of the Seas, which will be debuting January of 2024. I watch this video each and every day when we kind of show it, and I'm always just kind of amazed at the way in which Royal Caribbean's always kind of pushing the envelope of making the family experience on board a cruise vacation bigger and better, more enjoyable than ever. They're just so creative with how they use the space in the ship, and they're so creative, frankly, and aggressive in terms of finding even more space to put on a cruise ship. You're always amazed by how much they up the ante each and every time, and yet they always do. And it is so much fun to see. So I can't wait for you all to see Icon of the Seas coming up in January of 2024. And I'm reminded that just really on the other side of Go for 2 and 22 in the national championship, we hope that Georgia's celebrating. Me, my family, we're going to be on board Wonder of the Seas, which is the largest cruise ship in the world right now. And what a great experience that's going to be for us coming up in February. So you can be just as excited as I am about your own Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, about the one we're all taking on the DawgNation cruise in April. Our friend Jessica Slater can help you out with that. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. She's also put together a great website, royaldogs.com. That is royaldogs.com. to give you all the deets you need for the DawgNation cruise. And y'all, it is showtime, go time on this. It's about to be 2023. That means at that point in time, we're really only a couple of months away from this. So it is time to do it. It's time to get it done. Let's have a great time on board the DawgNation cruise together with with Independence of the Seas this upcoming April. Leaving out of Port Canaveral, Nassau, Perfect Day, Coco Cay. We'll see you there for that. All right, a couple of recruiting pieces of information to give you. First of all, Alabama did win a battle yesterday for Desmond Ricks. It was one of those last holdouts for them, not holdouts, but holdovers, I guess, in the recruiting conversation. They take down LSU for Rick's services, and Alabama kind of putting, another layer on that number one recruiting class for them. And listen, you got to give them credit. They have gone out, they've recruited very well, including in the state of Georgia, a couple of big names that Dog fans would like to have had. So there you go. You give them credit for that. It is interesting to me, though. I have to say this. It is interesting to me to watch Alabama fans become, and I said this yesterday, I'm going to say it again, become the kind of thing that they would have once made fun of. It used to be they would laugh at people who were more interested in recruiting rankings than they were on-field results. All of a sudden now it's Alabama fans trying to downplay the on-field results, and they are trying to, oh, look at us, we're the team of the future because we've recruited very well. But your blue chip ratio is already like 90%. This is a team almost solely made up of former 4- and 5-star recruits. The recruiting stuff alone is not going to seemingly fix what Alabama needs fixed, and I do believe there are some things that need to be fixed for the Crimson Tide. I'll say this right now, going into next season, I think they may be the most fascinating team of the offseason. And it's not because I'm sure they're going to implode. Frankly, I'm not sure of anything. They may find a quarterback. Maybe Ty Simpson's like the next great thing. They've obviously had a great string of quarterbacks. Maybe Ty Simpson's the next one. I don't know. But as of right now, it's a total mystery who starts a quarterback. There are some cultural things that seem to have kind of eroded a little bit for Alabama. So this is a fascinating offseason for the Crimson Tide, but clearly they've sent a pretty strong message here with their recruiting class. I'm just not quite so sure this means what they think it means, but nonetheless, you're forced to give them credit. Jaden Daniels says he's coming back for LSU. I think this is interesting. I guess I still probably don't quite think that Daniels is the difference-maker quarterback that some seem to think that he is, but clearly he did have a good year and good games down the stretch, and obviously LSU's chances of competing with Georgia would have been made better had Daniels been more fully healthy for the SEC championship, so you can't deny that. But, this is also one of those things for Brian Kelly where 2023 feels really different than 2022. Everybody gets a first year to sort of be whatever you want for it to be. And in the case of Kelly, he probably exceeded expectations in year one. But the problem is, it's fairly easy to exceed year one expectations because even at, football crazy programs like LSU, first year expectations are still relatively meager. But year two expectations are not really meager because we've seen, Kirby Smart year two makes the college football playoff. Mark Richt year two won the SEC. Nick Saban year two won the SEC West and was, essentially a top 5, top 10 type team in Alabama going back to 2008. By year three, they were winning the national championship. That when success occurs, it typically occurs pretty quickly, and if it doesn't come quickly, oftentimes it doesn't come at all. And so I would say for Brian Kelly, if you want to hitch your wagon to Jaden Daniels next year, and you have every reason to think you probably should, then that's fine. But what's expected from Kelly next year is far different than what was tolerable for Kelly this year. In other words, it's cool to win the West and get a chance to play Georgia, and hey, you can say you kind of had a good season, we gave it our best shot. But that kind of touchy-feely stuff doesn't really translate for year two. And by the way, this is true for like Billy Napier and others there as well. And in fact, there's a degree of which this is also kind of true for Josh Heupel as well. He's going into year three next year. But the what turned out to be a 10-2 regular season, a chance to be 11-2 with the bowl game, a chance to be in the top 10, a chance to have at least briefly been a part of the playoff conversation, that's not going to buy Heupel as much goodwill as maybe he thinks it's probably should. That they are also going to be expected to take the step forward next year too. So keep this in mind. You've got a lot of coaches in the SEC next season who are going to be asked to take steps forward. Brian Kelly, hey, can you build off of winning the SEC West in your first year? Jimbo Fisher, can you stop being embarrassing and being essentially the worst team in the SEC? Billy Napier, can you break the slide here that Florida's been on with back-to-back losing seasons? Josh Heupel, were you just a one-hit wonder, kind of a good, fun team to watch, or can you actually be a legitimate contender? For Mark Stoops, who's kind of been hanging around here as a part of the story, at least in the fringe in the SEC. Now you got Devin Leary, and you've got Liam Cohen, we believe, coming back as offensive coordinator. It's really funny how many coaches in the SEC are either going to be expected to or outright asked to step up their level of performance next season, take the next step towards major contention, and not all of them will. It is going to be a tumultuous 2023 in the SEC. We may see some of these plates shifting during the offseason there as well. I'll also briefly mention Tony Grimes. You may remember Grimes as a one-time recruiting target of Georgia, went to North Carolina, and frankly probably did not do much for the Tar Heels. And now he's on his way to Texas A&M. Now, I am not an expert on what I speak, but I can't help but wonder how much Grimes' career has been impacted by his decision to reclassify. When North Carolina won that recruiting battle, they won against Georgia by convincing Grimes, or maybe Grimes just liked the idea of, moving up a year, going in and or taking, your home in college and kind of skipping that final year of high school. This has been a big part of the basketball story for a long time. It's been a little bit more of a part of the football story, seemingly as of late. But y'all, football is a grown man's game. What was it that Kirby Smart said? about Roderick Robinson. This is still a sport about getting people to the ground, and that takes some physicality. And obviously, the older you get, the easier it is. The more you become a truly full-grown man, the easier it is to kind of leverage that physicality to your benefit. And so when you start playing college football sooner than you're required to, I do think you're taking a pretty big risk. And I honestly don't know if that's impacted Grimes or not. I really don't. But I can't help but wonder when, a reclassified player is kind of bouncing around like this. We haven't really heard a ton from him yet in college. You kind of wonder if that might have been a little bit of a factor on that. I'll also mention one more thing, too, here. I'm going to give you a brief preview of the bowls for the upcoming weekend. Now, my bowl picks have been okay so far. I gave out Toledo the other day. Probably shouldn't have done that. But, nonetheless, I've been okay with my bowl picks. We have 3 games taking place over Christmas weekend. There's a lot of NFL stuff this weekend, obviously, including, 3 games on Saturday from the NFL, too? Is Philly-Dallas on Saturday? That's a big game, right? Yeah, nobody knows more about the NFL than I do, so I'm really getting settled into it. This is my time of year when I sort of come out of my hibernation. I get really big into the NFL for a few weeks, so this is I almost even know when the big game is even taking place this weekend. So I'm getting ready to go for the NFL here for the weekend. But the point is, I am excited about Louisiana-Houston in the Independence Bowl. And I got to tell you, Houston here is a 7-point favorite, but Dana Holgorsen had a great history of success in bowl games. I feel like Louisiana might be the play here. Raging Cajuns in their home state. I feel like Louisiana might be the play against Houston. And I really like Wake Forest. It's the Gasparilla Bowl, which is in Tampa. I really like Wake Forest against Missouri. In fact, I'm not even sure Missouri has enough players to play. Yet the number here seems relatively small, just 2.5. Maybe that's trying to tell me something that I'm overvaluing Wake in this spot. I sort of feel like I'm not. I kind of like Wake minus the 2.5. I like Louisiana plus the 7 in the Independence Bowl. I don't have an opinion at all in the Middle Tennessee State, San Diego State game on the 24th. Traditionally, you've had that kind of Hawaiian Bowl game. This is also the Easy Post Hawaii Bowl. I don't have an opinion on San Diego State, Middle Tennessee State. I would say be careful of anything that takes place so far from home, and Hawaii's a long time from home. So I won't give you a pick between the Aztecs and the Blue Raiders, but I will say this. I saw a crystal ball the other day for DJ Uiagalelei to Hawaii. So I guess that'll be my one thought on the Hawaiian-centric college football. It will make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, by the way, I give you my picks on bowl games. Maybe I get them right, maybe I don't. Many of you far better at making picks than I am, and so you get a chance to put your money where your mouth is on that with our friends at MyBookie right now. What a great way to enjoy Christmas, whether it be NFL stuff over the course of this weekend. I don't know much about the NFL, but that might not stop me from betting on it. So jump in there and getting involved on that or the bowl stuff, which I really do love. I love trying to find an angle on these very weird bowl games with a million opt-outs and interim coaches and everything else. I think all that kind of stuff is really fun. So if you want to get involved in that too, our friends at MyBookie give you a chance to do that, and they've got a great holiday gift for you just for doing so. When you open up your account with MyBookie, whatever you put in there, up to $1,000, MyBookie is going to double that initial deposit for you. That means you put in $400, they'll put in $400. So in your account, you have $800 before you even win your first bet. Then after that, you play, you win, you get paid. It is literally that simple with MyBookie. So find them online. Just type MyBookie in your browser. The internet will do the work for you. And then after that, use the promo code DawgNation, all one word, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWG. You can find MyBookie today. Use the promo code DawgNation. Get the big deposit bonus. And then after that, enjoy winning season right here around MyBookie. All right, one more thing to kind of wrap up with for you today. On Fridays, we love to kind of close at the show in style. We love the weekend around here, and we especially love Christmas weekend. And our friends at the Finnish Long Drink love that too. So with all that in mind, we'll do our big finish here presented by the Finnish Long Drink. And Dustin Kreider sent this to me. This is really funny. So it's the elf on the shelf from the Kreider household here enjoying the Finnish Long Drink. And how about that? The elf enjoying the long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume. That's serious stuff for the elf there, so that's great to see. And so Dustin sent this to me, and I think that's great. And then Kelly Holbrook responded by saying, it looks like a beer, but it's not. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail right in the can. So Kelby, pardon me. Kelby, already a terrific pitch man, great ad man there with the line that we use. So Dustin, thanks for sharing that. Dustin's a great guy. And the elf on the shelf enjoying the Finnish Long Drink. What a great way to roll into Christmas right there. Glad to see the elves having a good time, and I'm sure your elves at your house are having a lot of fun too. I know ours have been into everything here this time of year, so so many of us having a great time with that. So thank you so much. And by the way, thanks to our friends at the Finnish Long Drink who've been such a big part of our holiday parties and the things we've been doing this time of year there as well. The Finnish Long Drink, just famous for that. And if you've not tried some, if the elf is on the shelf can find it, goodness knows you can find it there as well. So go ahead and do this for me. Go to thelongdrink.com. That's thelongdrink.com. And you can put in your zip code. You can find out where it is near you. Now, today's not really a day for golf courses, but there's a lot of golf courses that have the Finnish Long Drink. And there's the bars, the restaurants, the beverage stores, so many other things. You can try the cranberry, the Long Drink Strong, which is 8.5% alcohol by volume. That's the one the elf on the shelf is enjoying there. The Long Drink Zero, that's no carbs, no sugar. Long Drink Traditional, it's the blue can. It's got the citrus flavor. It's the gin kick. And as our friend Kelby said, it looks like a beer, but it's not. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail right there in the can. So if you like cocktails, mixed drinks, things like this is one you don't even have to mix. They've already mixed it for you. So enjoy the Finnish Long Drink today, and happy holidays to all of you, courtesy of the Finnish Long Drink. So Golden Shoe here today, and I think this is fantastic. Around here, we've been doing Go for 2 in 22, and one of our Golden Shoes of late have been Go for 2 in 22 themed. And I got one the other day, and I think this is fantastic. So, the Georgia-themed license plates? You see a lot of those. Well, it just so happens that one that's been in existence now for quite some time has apparently taken on some new meaning. Do we have this that we can show here? Somebody sent this to me. So Billy, I believe it's a Bouchelon, I believe how you say this. He says, my wife had this license plate for years. It just dawned on me this weekend how appropriate it is. He says, hashtag go for 2 in 22, hashtag golden shoe. And so what the license plate is, it's the Georgia themed plate, and it says 2 times 22. And that's exactly right. All of a sudden that takes on new meaning. 2 by 22? I love that. So, Billy, thanks for sharing that. And to you and your wife, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to both of you. And a golden shoe going your way is our special gift. Now, by the way, speaking of lousy, stinking Gators, no fun gifts for them. Nothing but coal in their stockings. In fact, George will be there to deliver in person in Jacksonville coming up 309 days from now. Boy, what a great way that is to roll into the Christmas weekend. Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy holidays there as well. Hope you enjoy it. And come back next week. Game face is on. Getting ready to go for 2 in 22. So you get some Christmas weekend to enjoy. But after that, we got to get serious about football. So we'll see you then to do just that. And on video, time now for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. We are happy to have them as a part of the program, and happy to have Connor Riley who's going to join us here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down there as well. And, y'all, we are not going long today. We're just not. I mean, I'm talking about we're going to pull the plug if this thing goes much past, let's say 11:25. We're going to do this for, what is that, 17 minutes? 17 minutes, 11:25. We're going to get off the air at 11:25. So y'all better get in, get your comments in, and get ready to get rolling with this. Connor, happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas. Glad to have you here.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. You have most of your shopping done at this point?
I have most of the shopping done that's going to get done. That's the problem. It's like at a certain point in time, you have this like stuff that you want to do. And like we're kind of in a stage of life where like my wife and I don't really give each other a lot of gifts. So it's one of those things where like, I have things I like to do, but as you get closer and closer to Christmas, it just is not going to happen. So thankfully, for kids and things like that, the stuff that really matters to my mom and that stuff's all squared away. But once again, my poor wife will probably not be just doused with presents. And as a return, she won't really probably be doing a ton for me there either. We will do stockings for each other though, which is always really nice.
Okay, good to hear.
How about you? Do you still get a lot of presents?
My parents do a good job of getting me a lot of presents. I don't know why. Like I don't need a lot. Most of the stuff I ask for at this point is like clothes or like trinkets and things like that to help around the house. My brother and sister, though, they tend to have more lavish, expensive tastes than I do. So their Christmas gifts are a little bit more expensive than mine. Whereas I'm a little bit more simpler. So I think because of that, my parents, maybe give me a few more gifts than my brother and sister who ask for a little bit more pricey items.
And they're younger than you, right?
Yes, I am the oldest in my family.
Yeah, so when you kind of get that sort of like, young 20-ish, whatever, I mean, that is a good time to sort of leverage your parents to get some big stuff. Because, I mean, for most young 20s, they don't have the money to kind of buy that for themselves. And they're, listen, you do have expensive taste. So why not see if the parents still want to kind of do that. DT says the banter is eating into our comments. 2-minute penalty. We shall see here.
Got a favorite Christmas movie?
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, the gold standard for me is the Charlie Brown Christmas. And it's not really a movie, but it's still a Christmas classic. Gold standard for me, the Charlie Brown Christmas. Beyond that, I like everything else everybody else likes. I continue to be amazed at how good Home Alone is it's a well constructed movie. So much fun. I love sharing it with my kids. The first time they saw it, their eyes were just like this. They couldn't believe how good it was. And I like Christmas Vacation. I like Elf. I also like any of the Christmas Carol versions. The Muppet Christmas Carol is probably the best.
Gold standard of Christmas Carol.
I mean, it's just so good. 30th anniversary, by the way, of the Muppet Christmas Carol this year. But any Christmas Carol, I love them. How about for you?
My mom and I always watch Christmas Vacation together on Christmas Eve. I watch Die Hard alone because I can't get anyone else to watch it with me, but it's absolutely a Christmas movie. But you touched on it. Home Alone is the best Christmas movie. There was a groundswell out there to make people say that Home Alone 2 is the better Christmas movie. Could not be more wrong. And I think the first 15 minutes from Uncle Frank in Home Alone is one of the all-time great villains. How Kevin McAllister's dad doesn't clock him for calling his son a little jerk. I mean, that's just poor parenting, and it really helps explain why Kevin was left home alone in that circumstance.
So I think you may be right about that. I don't have any memory from my actual childhood of Home Alone 2. And I'm not saying it's a bad movie or anything like that, but I remember Home Alone very well. Saw it in the movie theater many times. Back then, you just went to the movies over and over again because that's all we really had to do. So I saw Home Alone a million times. I don't remember seeing Home Alone 2 at all. I like the movie. It's fine. My kids like it a lot, but it doesn't have the same place in my heart as the original does. B-Max says, on the subject of smoke, Boo, you think smoke's coming to Georgia?
I do. I think the smoke is in the building. Not yet physically. I was trying to make a pun there. Don't go run wild with that. That's
you were literally yelling fire in a crowded theater by saying that.
I took that a little too far there. I think he fits a need with what Georgia is looking for. I think he can play safety. You heard Kirby Smart talking about the need for sort of versatile defensive backs on Saturday or on Wednesday rather, and I think Bowie absolutely fits that. I think he's a guy who could play either star or safety for them, and I think that's a quality add at a safety position that, yes, Malachi Starks was great this year, though made some mistakes in the game against LSU, which is going to happen when you're a freshman defensive back. And Jonah Aguero, I think, is going to be a very good player, but expecting him to be a star day one, much less what Chris Smith has been to this team this year. That's a really big ask.
Jimmy Moore says wideouts get hamstring injuries, things like that. You need as many as you can. I think there's a degree which that's true. But, Connor, the other thing is, and I hate to have to be so candid about this, Georgia just needs higher production from its wide receivers. So some of this is not about bolstering the depth. And I know when you look at all the list of guys that Georgia seemingly has catching balls next year, it looks amazing. But the truth is it kind of has always looked amazing, at least in recent years. And the actual production just kind of hasn't quite been enough. And as I said during the show, the number one reason for that may be injuries totally out of anyone's control. AD this year, Rosemary Jackson, obviously George Pickens. But whatever the reasons are, the results have been, I would say, substandard. And so the main reason that Ra and Dominic Lovett are here is not to bolster the depth. It is to provide the potential for a much more productive wide receiver room than Georgia has had in the past.
Yeah, I don't know what the ceiling of Georgia's wide receiver room is next year, but with the additions of Lovett and Thomas, I feel like the floor is significantly higher than it probably has been in years past.
Bill Sanders says the best version of the Christmas Carol is still the George C. Scott one. That means a lot to me, that movie does, because my grandfather in particular, introduced it to me, and I got a chance to watch that, and I loved it. It's the first time I'd ever seen the Christmas Carol when they showed it to me back in the 80s. I do really, really love that one. I think it really is good. But I like all of them. Like last night, because we're dorks, my wife and I were watching the Reginald Owen version from like 1938. Like all of the different Christmas carols have a little bit different thing that makes them all good, and I even like that one a lot. So I watch all of those.
Look, all the other ones are great, but they don't have Michael Caine giving the performance of a lifetime.
I'm telling you, if y'all have not seen Muppet Christmas Carol, I cannot recommend it highly enough. I am a massive Muppet fan. I love the Muppets. I think the Muppets are really, really funny. And the Muppets doing Christmas Carol is really, really great. And Michael Caine, who I do like, is so good in this movie. But the music, everything about the Muppet Christmas Carol is phenomenal. I literally have watched it several times already this month. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but I have watched it a ton. Ken Holcomb says Alabama's problem is the best coach, including Saban, is now the head coach Georgia. Connor, I want to be slow to say stuff like this because, it just sort of sounds like the kind of thing that could eventually be proven wrong. But Alabama does not feel like Alabama to me right now. And I have no idea who their starting quarterback's going to be next season. And, I mean, I don't mind telling you this. this sort of feels like the final year for Saban coming up. Either they go out on the top, or I could very easily see 2023 being Saban's last year, and I could also see it being one of these things of if it looks like they're not a national championship contender, then they'll turn this into the rocking chair tour. They'll turn this into the Swan Song tour as a way of saving face from what has otherwise just been a program that's regressed. I could very easily see this being Saban's last year at Alabama, because right now it just does not, even with the recruiting class, it just does not feel very Alabama-like with the Crimson Tide right now.
Right, and you even look at that 2021 recruiting class that was ranked number 1 in the country. They've lost a number of guys already from that recruiting cycle. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't know what Alabama is going to be next year. They could absolutely win the national championship. They still have enough raw talent there. I personally speaking, I hope Bill O'Brien is no longer the offensive coordinator there next year, because I kind of like him to be the offensive coordinator in New England. And I know that might come as a shock to some people, but I actually do think he's a really good offensive mind. I think there are deeper issues at bay with Alabama right now, but they could also, I think, maybe go 9-3 next season. And that's another step down from where this program has been. And they've got to answer some questions about who they are, what their identity is, because they're not the defensive monster that they've been in years past. And quite frankly, and as much as I just praised Bill O'Brien, this offense hasn't been the same since Steve Sarkisian left. And so what do you hang your hat on there if you're Alabama? This year it was just Bryce Young bailing them out time and time again, and then Will Anderson coming up with moments of individual brilliance. Both those guys are going to be in the NFL next year. And so while, and they're losing some key pieces in that secondary as well, Brian Branch, guys that have played a lot of snaps for them. It's going to be really interesting seeing what that team looks like next year. Again, I'm not writing them off. They're going to be a top 5 team in the country. Some people are going to have them number 1. But Bama is absolutely at a real crossroads moment right now, because this was supposed to be the year where everything clicked and came together and they ran through college football, and that very much did not happen.
And there's definitely a repercussion when something like that is supposed to happen and doesn't. I got 2 really interesting comments on this. Greg Rosenberg, I'm going to get to yours in a moment, but let me read Frederick Meredith here, who says that Saban's going to buy one more championship before he hangs them up. Look, here's what I think is kind of one of the interesting things going on right now. And what Frederick is saying is, obviously, it sort of stands to reason that it could be true, desperate for one more championship before the career comes to an end. I think that's what this year was supposed to be. I think that a lot of the recent recruiting class of Alabama have been kind of sold with that in mind. But, Connor, here's what I see happening right now, especially if Drake May really does remain content to stay at North Carolina. I don't think there's a national championship to be bought right now. I really don't. When Florida's grabbing Graham Mertz of the transfer portal, when, even with all due respect to a guy like, say, Devin Leary or something like that, I just don't see a quarterback who's changing the fortunes of the team that he's going to. We saw Caleb Williams make the move last year to USC, and that clearly paid off to the tune of, being in contention for the college football playoff. But even that, you had the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, and you still kind of came up short against Utah twice. So I have no doubt that Alabama would like to really rise up and, as Frederick says, buy one more championship for Saban. I'm just not really quite so sure there's a championship for sale here at the moment.
Right, and I think Georgia has shown that, at least in recent years, and again, this was Alabama's early identity when they were winning championships, just overwhelm them with talent. You don't need to have the very best player in college football on your team, I think, to win consistently. You need a lot of really good ones, obviously, and Georgia has done that. And there's maybe an argument this year that Jalen Carter is the best player in college football. But I think you've seen, what LSU did in 2019, what, Trevor Lawrence did at Clemson. Yes, those guys were individually brilliant. But there was a lot of other really great talent on that team, and that, I think, has maybe been eschewed a little bit by this, fascination that quarterbacks can turn things around and take you from a merely good team to a title winner. Alabama's got to figure out a lot of things. Who's going to be the running back next year with Jahmyr Gibbs off to the NFL? What does that wide receiver room look like as it has underperformed for a second straight season? So I think they really got to figure out what their identity is going to be this offseason. That's not something you necessarily want to try and craft on the fly. That's something you want to take and build over years.
I mean, even if Alabama were to convince Drake May to leave North Carolina, I still don't think that changes my overall outlook about – and I think that Drake May is a very good quarterback. I really do. But Alabama has the best quarterback in the country right now. And even a guy like Drake May going to Alabama, I don't think that would necessarily change all that much for me next season. You'd say, well, Bama's going to have a better quarterback than Georgia does. That may have been true for a long time now, right? And it certainly didn't stop Georgia from winning the national championship, last year. So I have no doubt they would love to, hey, really make one big push, a New York Mets-style push to go out there and just money whip everybody. I'm just not really quite so sure that opportunity exists right now in college football the way that maybe some people kind of assume that it would. In other words, I mean, clearly the transfer portal is this ever-present thing. I'm not really quite so sure. Like, it can turn a Michigan State into a contender, but I'm not really quite so sure it can turn an average team into a great team. Have we seen that happen yet? We've seen bad teams become good.
USC and Michigan State are probably your two most classic examples of going from mediocre to good. I don't think we've seen the transfer portal take a team from good, top 25 but not top 10 to great.
Yeah, I just don't think we've seen that yet. I'm not saying it won't happen, but it's important to kind of note what that is. Greg Rosenberg also mentions this. He says, let's be honest. There's no evaluating anything except what the competition's been doing. He says that Bama's been kicking our backsides and recruiting the last 3 years. That's going to show up on the field. So here's what I'd say to this, Greg, and you can say that I'm being too Georgia-centric if you want to. That's fine, but this is my opinion nonetheless. I know that Alabama has outrated Georgia in recruiting, but I don't believe I'd trade these recruiting classes. I certainly wouldn't trade the totality of Georgia's roster for Alabama's roster right now, even if Alabama's roster is kind of composite rated ahead of Georgia's, and it probably will be. It was going into this year. I just don't think I see more talent at Alabama than I currently see at Georgia. In fact, Connor mentioned the 2021 class a moment ago. At the time that happened, we were told that's the greatest class of all time. I'm not even sure it's better than Georgia's. I mean, when you think about what guys like Javon Bullard have turned out to be from the 2021 class,
Brock Bowers and Jamon Dumas-Johnson were not top 100 overall players in that recruiting cycle.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I mean, look, I'll take Bullard against almost anybody right now. Like that's a guy that is so far exceeding his recruiting ranking. And as Connor said, JDJ and Bowers also kind of, outside the top 100 there as well. And this seems like a grotesque hot take compared to what people were saying with the Bama class when it was first signed in 2021. I'm not even actually quite so sure it's even better than what Georgia did that year.
The simplest answer to a rebuttal of this, and we've already seen it play out. Go look at the Alabama 2019 recruiting class and the Georgia 2019 recruiting class.
Yeah.
Alabama finished number 1 that year. Georgia finished number 2. If you go and look at the names on that list, it's not even close how much better Georgia's class is there. And Kirby touched on this on Wednesday. It's not just about signing these guys and getting them into your program. It's how you develop. And I think right now, Georgia's doing a better job of developing its players and its prospects. They've done a great job of identifying guys. And while, yes, Alabama is getting guys that the recruiting industry might value higher, I think Georgia, as it is right now, and that's not to say that Alabama isn't getting a lot out of these players. They're still consistently producing multiple first-round draft picks. They might have 4 this year. I think you've seen from Georgia that they have a very special sauce that they work in and get the most out of every player on their roster, whether it be the obvious 5 stars like Trayvon Walker and Jalen Carter or guys that are lower ranked like Javon Bullard and a Jordan Davis.
And listen, I say all that knowing full well, as somebody who's been pretty well acquainted with their careers, I think Caleb Downs and Justice Haynes are amazing. Amazing. And I would have loved to have both those guys. Caleb Downs for a long time. I would say that Justice became a very different player in my mind this year. Maybe it's because he was playing at Buford, but I would say that Justice became an even higher level of player in my mind this year, watching him a couple of times, than what I thought he was the previous year at Blessed Trinity. So I think it's possible to say, man, I would have loved to have seen Georgia get Haynes and Downs, and credit to Alabama for coming in this state and winning them. I think it's possible to believe that on the one hand, and yet overall, I think Georgia's 2023 recruiting class is a massive success. I think it's a smashing success. There's no Arch Manning. There's no in-state stars like Downs and Haynes. But, y'all, I think that Georgia fans for years to come are going to be very, very thankful for a lot of the guys who are in here. I really do believe that.
It was a down year in the state of Georgia in terms of the usual churn of top prospects. Only 5 top 100 overall players, whereas in 2021 and 2020, or 2021 and 2022, rather, there were 9 top 100 guys in the state. And for Georgia to still go out and sign the clear number 2 class in the country, and if they had been able to land Downs and Haynes, would have been probably number 1. I think that speaks to how well put together this Georgia recruiting class is.
And y'all can save this tape if you want to and use it against me later on. I honestly believe that whatever issue you might think exists with Georgia and like some of these Metro Atlanta Gwinnett kind of guys like Caleb and Justice and guys like that, I think that is solved in the class of 2024. And this time a year from now, if that's not the case, then you can say, well, BA, you said to bring this back up if I was wrong, and you can do that then. But look, Georgia's already gotten Jaden Perlotti, the linebacker from Buford. That to me is a little bit of an indicator. That to me is a little bit of a sign that Georgia may be in a pretty good spot for a guy like Edric Houston, who I believe is going to be one of the most talked about players in our entire sphere over the course of the next year. This is just a Trayvon Walker-like defensive lineman in my mind. I think K.J. Bolden will remind you a little bit of what Caleb Downs was this year, and I think that Georgia may be in a pretty good spot with him too. Or maybe
Sammy Brown, Mike
yes,
Matthews.
Yeah.
Next year is loaded, especially at the top of the state.
It's a very deep year in the state, and in that area in which you kind of think Georgia hasn't done well. Connor mentioned Mike Matthews out of Parkview. In that area in which you think that Georgia hasn't done so well, Gwinnett County, Metro Atlanta type stuff, I really do think that Georgia's going to answer a lot of that with how the 2024 class plays out, and all of a sudden it may make missing on Downs and Haynes sort of seem more like statistical anomalies as opposed to the actual trend that suggests anything, dire or anything like that. All right, it's 11:25, so let's do quick final takes around the comment section, and we're going to get off the air here. Zach Adams says, I'd love to have had both those guys, meaning Haynes and Downs. But now all I want is for Bowers to lower that shoulder and put Downs on his back. Yeah, I mean, listen, there's nothing wrong with that. The idea of the moment you decide not to come to my school, you become the competition. And I think a lot of Georgia fans viewed Jermaine Burton that way a year ago, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I mean, this is competitive, and there is a lot at stake here. And when you choose to play for the other team, you do become, at least in the sports realm, kind of the bad guy. And I don't think there's anything wrong with viewing it that way. This is about competition, and players all kind of fully know that there as well. All right, DawgNation.com for the last time. DT says Kirby took Napier's lunch money on the recruiting trail with 9 signees from Florida. I think that's absolutely true. And, Connor, this is significant enough for me right now, and I guess we'll still see how Kermani McLean shakes out or something like that. But I think if you're a Florida fan, I do think you have to be a little bit worried about Billy Napier. They pretend they won't, but they were saying the same stuff about Dan Mullen for years. And obviously I'm a Gator hater, so you can say, well, BA, your opinion on this is not exactly objective, which is fine. I think the next 12 months are going to be huge for Billy Napier. They are clearly going to try to remake their roster in the transfer portal. And as I said a moment ago, I'm not sure if the talent's there. I mean, whether it's smart or not, I just don't know that there's enough elite players in the portal to remake a roster. They've got the space to add them. I'm just not sure the players are there.
I'll ask you this. Lincoln Riley, Sonny Dykes, Brian Kelly, they all inherited losing teams from a season ago.
Yeah.
I guess Florida technically was a losing team as well, going 6-7. They were able to flip their rosters and become top 20 programs. Why wasn't Billy Napier able to do that? You can say, the culture that they inherited from Dan Mullen wasn't great. I'm sorry. Look at what Lincoln Riley inherited at USC. Look at what Brian Kelly inherited at Ogeron. Those cultures, in my opinion, were far more rot than what Billy Napier stepped into. And he was talked about being an elite recruiter, about how he was going to make an impact there. And yes, they did sign more technical blue chips in this class than they have in the Mullen era. But signing the number 10 overall recruiting class isn't going to get you where you need to be in this day and age, especially when teams you play every year, Georgia and LSU right now, are both finishing ahead of you by like a healthy margin. Billy Napier, look, his job might not be hot right now, but if they go through again a season like they did this year, that's not going to be acceptable.
They're getting very close to being what Tennessee became.
Yep.
And I listen, I don't say that lightly. They really are. And one more point about this, I'm by far not the first person to say this. LSU needed a coach and didn't give Billy Napier the time of day.
Yep.
And he was right down the road. I mean, that means something. Now, it may mean that LSU's egomaniacs. I think Bud Elliott's the first one to bring that up. But it means something that LSU needed a coach and didn't look at Billy Napier.
They wanted no part. They could have had Napier, sign, seal, deliver. They wanted no part of him.
All right, the last comment prior to Christmas belongs to Jay Shipes, who says that UGA has the best coaching staff in college football. That's why. Most development, you're blind if you can't see. I do think that Jay brings up a pretty good point. I don't say that much about Jay, but I do think,
be nice. It's Christmas.
I do think that Jay brings a really good point. That one of the big takeaways you have to have from the last few months around Georgia football is they seemingly identified a rising star in Fran Brown. And Chidera Uzodiribe, they seemingly have identified a rising star there as well. It is not easy to spot young coaches who are going to turn into big-time guys. But Kirby did that with Trey Scott. And it may have been a bumpy road for a minute there, but he was a young coach trying to find his way around. All of a sudden now he's as a valuable commodity as exists in the position coaching ranks. I think they did that with Dan Lanning. He's proven to be a really exciting head coach, but he was a successful assistant at Georgia. And guys like Uzodiribe and Fran Brown sort of look like the next generation of all that. It is not as easy to keep hiring successful coaches as Kirby has. And listen, I think you'd probably say that Kirby hasn't batted 1,000 here. There have been guys that didn't stick here very long, so it's not like everybody has been, a grand slam home run. But the batting average is really pretty good all the way around, and I do think that Jay is really onto something here. This 2023 class, in a lot of ways, does validate what Kirby said to begin the season, which was that he likes his coaching staff as much as anything he's ever had.
Yeah, he said it at the beginning of the year. they somehow have only lost Buster Faulkner as an analyst off this staff. There's a very real world where all 10 on-field coaches are with this team again next year. That's really unprecedented in this day and age for a team that has had Georgia's level of success. And as we sit here on December 23rd, the day of Festivus, there's not exactly a whole lot of airing of grievances to be had if you're a Georgia football fan right now. I think Kirby Smart deserves a lot of credit for that.
All right, Connor, anything else? Final thoughts here? By the way, I really wanted to wear the Santa Claus hat on the show today. It just doesn't fit. Like, it doesn't.
Look, maybe Santa had a small head. I don't know what it is. They need to make Santa hats for larger sized headed individuals.
I mean, aren't Santa hats supposed to be sort of cartoonishly big as it is?
Yeah.
This thing is like stretching. I mean, this is stretching to the point it's about to break.
Look, if
how big is my head?
Look, they have the big hats. They're all the rage right now. Give me a big Santa hat. I think that's like the final level of the big hat, where maybe then after it dies out a little bit.
I feel like I sort of need that, but nonetheless, honestly, as sincerely as I know how to be, y'all, the Christmas season gives us a chance to think about what we have around here, and we are so grateful for that. You know, Connor and I do kind of different jobs during the week, but I'm sure he and I both feel the same way, which is that we have great sponsors that allow us to have the resources we need to deliver content to you, and the fact that the content we deliver gives us the privilege of also having conversation with you, whether it be in a situation like this, the comments back and forth, those of you that we meet on social media, we get a chance to meet some of you in person, or those of you that we'll never meet, but you're just kind enough to show up and be a part of what we do each and every day. The opportunity to narrate the experience of being a Georgia fan right now is such an awesome privilege and opportunity. So thank you so much. I literally don't want anything for Christmas, don't need anything for Christmas, because all of you, in one way or another, have given me everything I could ever want. So thank you so much for all of that. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to all of you. And then, Connor, we don't get a chance to hear from you in this space too much, so I'll give you the final word as we get ready to say goodbye.
Can't give me the final word, but just thank you guys so much for letting us do what we do. I know the weather outside is not exactly what you want right now around Christmas time if you're a Southern-bred person. But this has been really cool to come in and do this. I love my job, and I am so grateful that I get to do what I do in the variety of roles. And it's because of people like you. It's because of people like Brandon Adams and DawgNation and the entire family here. So we thank you guys so much. We hope there's no news on Christmas. We hope, that if you're checking DawgNation, you're reading articles that are a day or two old at that point. I hope we don't have to fire up YouTube and discuss a certain transfer commitment.
Sure.
But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And go Dogs.
So here's the thing. Enjoy Christmas. Have some eggnog. Eat some cookies. Do whatever you want to do. Come Monday, I need your game face on. I need you serious. It's go for 2 and 22. The Ohio State Buckeyes loom. They want to take food off our table. So enjoy your Christmas time, but be ready to get back to battle again on Monday. We'll see you then. Here on DawgNation Daily, our RS Enders Cool Down. Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.